I'd like to welcome everybody back to BUFORD PUSSER, the other story. And today we're going to discuss things that Buford said. And the reason for this is because an honorary historian and a lot of other people over in that area that claim that you had to be there to know the Pusser story. Well, as I've pointed out before, this honorary historian that says you had to be there to know the real story, well, he was only 10 years old when Buford was elected sheriff, so how would he know? I doubt that he and Buford were buddies and that he allowed this kid to ride around with him all the time. But you have to remember, just because these people say, well, if Buford said it, that's the way it happened. Well, that's not necessarily true, because if you check out his story like that we're going to today, you're going to find out that Buford was incorrect about a lot of information. But that being said, we are going to address some of the things that Buford would say. And we'll begin with shortly after Buford was elected sheriff, when they raided the state line in a joint operation between Mississippi, Tennessee, and different state agencies and county agencies. It's kind of an interesting story, and you may be surprised by some of this. I have an associate, Chuck Puckett, who was friends with Rex Armistead, an investigator from Mississippi. In December of 1964, they were getting ready to raid the state line establishments. Now, you have to keep in mind that the state line establishments by that time basically involved the Shamrock Motel and the White Iris on the Tennessee side, and the Shamrock Restaurant on the Mississippi side of the line. Well, like I said, every time that they would think about doing something, the word seemed to leak out. And so they brought Pusser into this meeting under the guise that it was an intelligence meeting. It wasn't until Buford got there that he found out, according to Rex Armistead, that it was going to be a raid on the state line, and they kept someone with Buford so he couldn't make any phone calls. Well, they got down to the state line, and they raided it from both sides simultaneously. On the Mississippi side, when they raided the restaurant, they found dice that had been shaved, as they were apparently being used for different things, but the gambling that we saw at the restaurant was basically the razzle-dazzle game. Now, this is something that had been going on for some time to fleece out-of-state tourists. And it was one of those things where Louise was going to be arrested for that. They also had undercover operatives going into the restaurant, being able to buy alcohol where it was illegal, so on. And so she was also going to be arrested for that. Now, on the Tennessee side, where Sheriff Pusser had jurisdiction, when they raided that establishment, they found that in her car, in the trunk, was some alcohol that was untaxed. Now, when I say it was untaxed, I'm talking about bootleg alcohol that comes in from other places, out of state usually, like Caruthersville, Missouri, where they would bring it down through Dyersburg to the state line, and then they would sell it there. The problem was Tennessee didn't get any tax money, and so therefore it was illegal. Well, with so many officers around, Buford actually had to arrest Louise. There was no way that he could get around it without it looking like that maybe he was the one that had been offering her tips about when raids were going to take place. Of course, they went over to the White Iris, and I don't believe that they found anything there. And Towhead White was not present, so he was not arrested. But Louise was, and she had to pay a fine, and she had 2 vehicles that were confiscated and sold by the state as they were being used to transport illegal whiskey and alcohol. One thing I might add is, if you think about it, the razzle game, the one where they found the shaved dice. Now, keep in mind what we saw in Walking Tall. They had a casino in the back of one of these state line establishments. That didn't happen. That was all movie. And I wanted to make that clear in this part. Now, my question is, if Sheriff Wilbanks of Alcorn County was aware of this, the Mississippi Highway Patrol was aware of it, if the state of Tennessee and the TBI were aware of all this taking place, why had Buford not been doing anything up to this point? After all, they had been sending agents into the Mississippi side looking for issues and problems. But I'm not so sure that happened in Tennessee. I can't seem to find anything on that. So it does make you wonder, was Buford part of the problem down there? Now, in 1965, not a whole lot happened. Towhead White went to prison, but that had nothing to do with Buford, as it was Sheriff James Bishop in Tishomingo County that arrested him and sent him up. Other than that, things at the state line appeared to be relatively quiet. Well, things were quiet as far as the state line went. But for Buford, he had his stories to tell. One being that he picked up a hitchhiker, just planning on giving him a meal and a place to stay for the night in his county jail. And his story went on that the hitchhiker pulled a knife, stabbed him twice in the chest, and then fled. Buford was never able to identify this individual. A little bit later, he said that he was working at a house fire, and there had been a fatality there, so the county coroner, Ward Moore, was present. Buford would claim that while he was there directing traffic, a car came up, loaded down heavily in the back end, and Buford thought they might be hauling moonshine, so he went over to investigate. So the car took off. He jumped on the hood. While he was hanging on, that he was being beaten on the arms by the lady in the passenger seat with a wrench. The driver was stabbing his forearms. Now, Ward Moore, who was there and saw the incident, did tell me that Buford did get on the hood of the car, did try to stop it, but he said Buford wasn't stabbed. A little later, Ward was in Selmer, and he heard Buford's Uncle Ben telling the story. And knowing it wasn't true, Ward told me that he asked Ben, "Why are you telling stories like that? I was there. It didn't happen that way." And he said Ben's response was, "Well, that helps Buford get votes." The next thing we heard was in 1966, and that's when in early February that year, Buford shot and killed Louise Hathcock in a very questionable shootout, if you will. Buford would claim that he, his chief deputy Jim Moffitt, and Deputy Petey Plunk went to the state line to serve search warrants on Louise for stolen property, where a couple had reported a purse had been stolen from their room, and another for intoxicating liquors. Now, Buford would say that Hathcock was intoxicated and belligerent toward he and his deputies. That when she realized that she was going to be arrested, that she asked him to go to her private living quarters in room number 1, which he did. But he was the only one that went in there with her. Petey Plunk was out in the office. Jim Moffitt followed as far as the hallway, but he couldn't see in the room. But then shots were fired. Buford's story was that the first shot that she fired missed his head, went through a window pane, and lodged itself in an awning post out in front of the office. He said when he realized that she was going to fire again, he pulled his gun and shot her. And he realized that she had not fallen, so he shot her a second time. And then finally, while she was on the floor, he claimed that she would raise her gun, start to fire again, and he shot her a third time. The funny thing is, he wouldn't tell us that the first shot that he took hit her in the backside of the shoulder, and that the second shot hit her near the left shoulder blade and exited out under her right breast. Now he claimed that she fell to the floor with that and that she started to raise her gun again, so he shot her a third time. We wouldn't know the truth about all this except for years later. Someone uncovered her autopsy report, which showed 2 shots to the posterior side of her body and 1 near her left jawline, where the bullet exited out the back of her skull, embedding teeth in the carpet behind her head. Hardly sounds like that she was facing him and raised a gun, nor does it sound like that with teeth being embedded in the carpet behind her head that she was raising the gun to fire again. It was about this time that the state line became quiet, not because Buford had killed Louise Hathcock, but because the IRS had a lien on the property and they were about to take it. Something that Buford was aware of, according to Hathcock family members. Their theory is that Buford killed her so that he would have time to search for money that she kept at the Shamrock before the IRS could step in and claim the properties. Now, the next incident was on Monday, January 2nd of 1967. Buford claimed that he was returning to Selmer. He was about 6 miles away, I assume somewhere near Eastview, when a car passed him, driving at a high speed, he said was about 85 miles an hour, and weaving across the center line. So he stopped it. As he walked up to the car, he was seeing 2 individuals. One produced a gun and fired several times. Buford's story was that he took 2 rounds in his left cheek, 1 in his left forearm, and 1 that grazed his stomach. Amazingly, the 2 shots that went through his left cheek did not injure his lips, teeth, gums, or tongue. It's amazing that you could get shot twice there and have no more injuries than a hole in your cheek. The thing that is noteworthy is that Towhead White, his main nemesis, had walked away from a minimum security prison in Montgomery, Alabama, where he was serving time for his 3-state moonshine operation. Buford was afraid that Towhead was coming after him, according to those that knew both White and Buford. Now, this was another one of those incidents where there were no witnesses to this incident. Now, Buford drove himself to the hospital, and when he got there, personnel there reported that he spent the next 3 hours coordinating the search for Towhead White, even though he couldn't identify White as the person in the vehicle that shot him. Of course, many people have suggested that because of the circumstances, they believe that Buford's wounds were self-inflicted. Buford's story about the ambush is one that I have never really understood. Carl Pusser would claim that he received calls early in the morning of August 12th that there was a disturbance at Hollis Jordan's beer joint there near the state line, and that somebody was going to get killed. Well, when Carl decided not to call Buford, saying that they closed up shop about 2:30 on weekends, he refused to call Buford and let him know about the disturbance. This forced the party, according to certain sources, to call Buford's home. And there, Buford got up, started to respond, and said that Pauline insisted on going with him because she was worried about his safety when he would go out at night. Now, I don't know what a small woman like Pauline could have done to protect a man the size of Buford if trouble had started, I would think that he would be more interested in trying to protect her than the other way around. However, they took a convoluted route down to the state line. Rather than going down Highways 64, which was about 2 blocks from Buford's home, and then turning onto 45 and going straight in to the state line area. Now, along the way, Buford said that a car started to follow him near the New Hope Methodist Church, and he didn't notice it until it got almost alongside him at the bridge there, 7/10 of a mile from that church. It turned its headlights on. 2 shots rang out, and he claimed that one struck Pauline in the head, that she was only wounded. Now, he said he hit the gas, tried to lose him, got 2 miles down the road, stopped, and he said it wasn't long before they were on him again. More shots rang out. Buford went to the floorboard. Pauline got hit in the head a second time. That's when she was killed. Now, why is this so key? I think one of the things that the TBI is looking for in their current investigation is exactly how many times that Pauline was actually shot. That could tell a whole lot. It could confirm parts of his story, or it could blow it apart. When they got Buford to the hospital in Memphis, and he was able to speak about the incident, they asked him if he knew who his assailants were. And he said, "I don't know." Yet later, he changed that story. I wonder why. There is all this information and so much more that has led many to believe that Buford may have killed Pauline. And that's the reason that the investigation into her death has reignited. Now, of course, you'll never convince the naysayers, the ones that are the historians from the area that say, well, if Buford said it, then I believe that's the way it was. Well, that's not how you get to the bottom of a crime. So you have to ask yourself, which matters most? The evidence or some historian's gut feeling? Personally, I'm going with the evidence. There are these and so many other stories that we could get into about Buford's ever-changing stories. The way that he would say one thing at one time and then change it to be something entirely different later. All sorts of contradictions are out there. So maybe one of these days, the naysayers will get on board and start to look for the truth rather than the legend. Now, before his death, Jim Moffitt said that he felt like the 3 movies made about Pusser's life gave the county a bad reputation. He said that life was just not that raw. If it had been, no one could have lived here. I think a lot of people in McNairy County would agree with what Jim said. I'll end it by saying the same thing I always say. Truth has no agenda. And thanks for watching.